Mrs. Smith called and wants a cabinet made. It needs to go in her living room. She wants a place to display her dishes and store some tablecloths, and it'd be really cool if there was a place dedicated to store her fancy silverware. She would like it to match as close as possible her grandmother's table and chairs. Can you make something like this? She asked. Heck yes! She's already done all the work. Hi, my name's Roger Kugler. This is Working at Woodworking Podcast, episode number 72, the design process. And stick to the end. I do have an update on a couple previous episodes. Rarely will you ever get this phone call. Usually it's something like, Hi, can you make a cabinet for my dining room? You know that you've got a lot of work ahead of you. You can't build something until you know what you're building. And you can't know what you're building until you ask about 100 questions. So that's what we're going to get into this episode. This is my unofficial 12-step program to project design. And I've received a few emails and phone calls from folks needing a little help to they've got a big project, they've never really done something like this, and a couple of them have actually signed up for coaching calls, and we kind of went through the process. It is a different process going from charcuterie boards to building, let's say, a china cabinet. There's different skills involved. There's different mindsets. So that's what we're going to kind of go over today, some of the bigger projects. So step 1, qualify the customer. What do I mean by this? You don't want to go through all the work that we're going to talk about over the next several steps, only to have the customer say, well, I saw something similar at IKEA and it's cheaper. I wish I could say I've never experienced that, but I would be lying. Whenever I started out, I made all kinds of mistakes, and that's one of the purposes of working at woodworking, is to help you not make some of the mistakes that I suffered through. So qualifying the customer is super important. That's why it's literally number 1. You've got to kind of suss out, is this customer kind of kicking the tires, so to speak, or are they serious? And if they are serious, the next big question is, can they pay for it? Because you don't work for free. At least I hope you don't. And your time and talent needs to be compensated. If someone's comparing your work to IKEA, well, honestly, most people just don't know. IKEA is the only thing they've really seen. And you can't really fault them for this. I mean, IKEA has its place in the world of furniture and cabinetry, but you're not doing that. And a couple times I'll get a phone call, well, I saw this at IKEA, can you make it cheaper? And I die a little bit inside. Or I kind of throw up in my mouth. And again, nothing against the person asking a question, because they just don't know any better. But no, I can't make it cheaper than IKEA. You just cannot do that because they make things absolutely as cheap as possible. I can't even buy the materials to make that compared to the overall price of what IKEA is charging. So, how do you qualify the question? Ask. This took me a long time to learn, and then a longer time to actually do. Ask. You're not being rude. This is business. And I phrase it very simply. So what's your budget for this project? It comes across fairly professional, not being rude or insulting. If you say something like, yeah, I can build it. Can you pay for it? Yeah, okay, that may not be the best tack. So scope out the person, and you can figure out where they're coming from within probably a few sentences. If they can't afford this piece that you would make them, maybe suggest some other places, maybe some other furniture stores or something where they can find something. I recommend people shop the used market, the used furniture stores. You can find some really nice old pieces that if it needs some work, talk to me. I might be able to turn something that you find into exactly what you're looking for. So that's a good option for a lot of people whose budget is just a little limited. Step number 2, you have to do a site visit. Yeah, you can do this over the phone, send pictures back and forth, but you're missing a lot of the detail that you need to gather. When you do your site visit, be clean, be presentable, be polite, pay compliments. This is a really nice house. Oh, I just love this. Insert little detail that you see. Get the conversation flowing. And while you're doing that, notice everything. What style is the house? About how old is it? What are the trim details in the house? The window casings, the door casings, the baseboard. How high is the baseboard? Is it just a plain, simple baseboard, or is there some molding detail? Are there aprons under the windows? Just notice all of these things. Color. What is the overall color of the house and of the room? What taste does this person have? Look at the furniture. Is it mid-modern eclectic? Or is it Louis the 14th? Figure out what's going on inside their house. And then you need to get down to it and just ask questions. What do you want this to look like? That can be a real hard question for some people because they really don't know. They just know that they want a china cabinet. So you're going to have to help them a little bit. Now, our caller at the intro, she laid everything out. She wants it to match her grandmother's dining room table. Boom, simple. You look at the dining room table and probably it has a clear finish on it. I'm going to guess it's probably oak, probably red oak, maybe with a, what do they call that, antique gold finish or something like that, the golden finish, or maybe it's a really dark brown. Maybe this is a quarter sawn white oak that has been fumed. That tells you everything that you need to know as far as what this is going to look like. Ask what color she wants this to be. Does it need to match something in a room? Does it, just white, or gray is real trendy right now? So that tells you that it's a painted piece, and that also tells you what materials you can use to build this. Maybe they want a clear finish. Okay. Do they want it stained? Furniture companies stain everything because it gives uniform, consistent color. That's what they're selling. If you're building something yourself and you have your choice of materials, you can be creative and not use any stain at all. So this is something that, in the back of your head, you're kind of thinking about, kind of feeling out the customer. Are they into that? Or, well, I like the rocking chair over there and that's kind of a deep brown. Okay, so we're probably staining this piece. Then you get down to some details. How many doors do they want on this? Should they all have glass? Should a couple of them be solid panel? If so, should it be a raised panel? Should it be a flat panel? Should it be something, a little creative, a little weird, and maybe a carved panel or maybe a veneered burl panel? Do they want glass? What type of glass? Does this need to be a museum glass type thing that blocks out UV light? If they're putting something in there that could fade and be destroyed, we might want to go that way. Look at the window positions in the room. How much direct sunlight does this get? Will it fall upon the china cabinet? You're looking for all of these things, and this is why the site visit is so important. You can't get this generally from photos. Drawers. How many? What size? What are you going to put in them? The last thing you want to do is to build a drawer that they can put their big mixer in and it doesn't fit. So ask these questions. Should the drawers have side mount, full extension? Should they be 3/4 extension? Save a little bit of money. Maybe they want wood on wood drawer slides, depending on the piece. If you're building a reproduction of like an old shaker cabinet, side mount drawer slides full extension may not quite fit with that. Well, then you might want to go with an undermount where you still get the function of the full extension modern drawer slide, but nobody can see it. Anything special the customer wants. Maybe a little hidden cubby someplace. Maybe they saw a TV show where Antique Roadshow, and in this one china cabinet there was a little secret storage compartment. If you lifted up this panel on the shelf and you had this little secret compartment. They might want something like that. You might suggest something like that. They get excited about it and they pay you more money for that. So, these are all on the table during this initial site visit. Step 3, you finish the site visit. Now the work kind of starts, because this is the brainstorming step. Think about it. Maybe grab a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, sit out on the back deck under a tree, and just start thinking about it. How could you put this together? Build this inside your mind first, the mind's eye, so to speak. Because you're having to pull together all of the elements that you discussed. And by the way, when you're at that site visit, make sure you're writing stuff down. Most everyone has a cell phone that has a camera or even a video. Take pictures, take video of the space to kind of jog your memory. I find customers are rather impressed by that you're actually paying attention to detail. It gives them some confidence that you know what you're doing, even though this might be your first time. But if you can project that confidence, hey, that's half the battle right there. When you're going through this, remember what's in the home, the baseboard. Was there a particular molding or profile, either on the baseboard or the window door casings, something that you could pick up and incorporate into that? Now, our customer who called, she wanted it to match the kitchen table or the dining room table. You're taking all kinds of photos of that dining room table. You are looking for how it was built, the construction, the joinery, maybe any decorative molding, fluting on the legs. Were the legs round? Were they tapered? Get all the details of that. Look at the chairs. How were they constructed? Was there anything unique? If you can pull something from the chairs or the dining room table and incorporate that into the china cabinet, you have just struck gold. Because that's what the person really wants, but she doesn't know how to articulate that, if that makes any sense. They don't know what to ask for, in other words. And that's where you, as the designer, as the artist, as the craftsman, come in and lend your skills to create exactly what the customer wants. So you're thinking about this. You're thinking about the overall shape. You're thinking about the number of doors, the number of drawers. And you start to get into some ratios. I could have two doors below, lower cabinet, with 3 drawers above, and then a center section, and then the upper case might have 4 doors. Ooh, that would kind of look. So we've got this 2, 3, 4 ratio going on. You're playing with things like this. Just how is this going to look? You might want to jump on the internet of things and do some scouting. See what else is out there on the market. Now, technically, we should all be going to furniture stores to kind of, keep up with the current fashion. But yeah, that's been about, 15 15, 20 years ago, since I've been in one. I'll take that back. That was in 2014. Nope, 2012, last time I was in a furniture store. I learned that virtually all furniture comes in boxes, that the furniture store then assembles and puts out on a showroom. Boom. Mind-blowing. Did not know that. Anyway, now you're starting to think about some basic construction. I mean, we're not into shop drawings yet, but you're figuring out how things are going to go. Is this going to be built out of plywood, with just flat sides? Is this going to be frame and panel construction with solid hardwood? Is this going to kind of be a faux frame and panel using plywood and hardwood? Maybe just solid lumber. Are you going to have to glue this up? Can you get material that wide? Do you want to get material that wide? The back. Is it going to be a plywood back? Maybe it's going to be a slat back made up of individual pieces. Maybe those pieces would be beaded that fit together in a tongue and groove fashion. Oh, budget's a little tight. 3/8-inch beadboard plywood at the big box store. I've used that in a lot of bookcases. It's inexpensive. It looks okay once you get a finish on it. And it's really pretty inexpensive. And for some projects, that was absolutely perfect. Now we get to one of the things that most people, when they're starting out, kind of overlook. Access. How did you get into the house? How far did you have to walk from the driveway? Did you go through the front entrance? Did you go through the garage? If you went through the front entrance, did you ask, what is the quickest way into this room? Well, it might actually be going from the driveway around the back of the house and in through great big French doors that open up to 72 inches. Whoa, wouldn't that be a dream? Or did you have to go up 3 flights of stairs? Were the stairs straight? Were they L-shaped, a quarter turn? Were they U-shaped, a half turn? Maybe they were a spiral staircase where you're pretty much screwed. You're going through a window someplace, maybe with a crane coming in. Curved staircases? Yeah, that's just a little different than a straight staircase. Maybe you have a bifurcated staircase. Ooh. A bifurcated staircase is basically 2 staircases combined, where a straight staircase or maybe a curved staircase goes up and then it splits. One goes right, one goes left. My wife and I were sitting on the couch watching one of those old movies, and this beautiful young woman came walking down this staircase, and I just wow, beautiful, absolutely beautiful. Now my wife kind of took issue with my praise and my words and kind of looked over and said, "What did you say?" I said, "Beautiful. Look at that bifurcated staircase." It's kind of the relationship that we have. Maybe you live in a big city. Maybe there's tall buildings. The only way you're going to get any place is in an elevator. Do they have a service elevator? Can you see the service elevator? Can you see how big it is? Can you maybe talk to the building manager to figure out what's the logistics to use a service elevator? Do they need to be union contractor movers that can only use this, so on and so forth? I have never lived in a big city like this where I had to rely on a service elevator. Come to think of it, any elevator. So I'm way out of my league there. I know that in Europe, in Germany, Festool. My understanding is that Festool became really, really popular because you were able to take the tools into the apartment of this building that was built 200 or 300 years ago, long before service elevators were thought of. And you can set up all your tools, your workbench, and do all the work right there. I don't know, maybe some of our friends in Frankfurt or Würzburg could, share some of these details, but that's what I've heard probably on YouTube. So really scope out the access. Don't let this be a head scratcher. You show up with a piece and then figure out that it's actually too tall to fit through the doorway. You don't want to take this thing apart. I was actually hired by a lady to take apart a big dresser chest of drawers and to get it up a quarter turn staircase. No other way to do it. She had some movers try to do it. They gave up. I thought I could figure out a way of doing it. I failed. I ended up taking the bloody thing apart, carrying it up to the bedroom, and then reassembling it. You don't want to do that. So really, really pay attention to this. How are you going to get the piece there? You're a one-person shop. That's kind of what the ground rules for working at woodworking. You're a one-person shop. Maybe you're really lucky and have a neighbor, like Norm Abrams in New Yankee Workshop that works nights. You can get him to come over and give you a hand, lifting this thing up and toting it up. Maybe you drive a Honda Civic and that's not going to work. Maybe you have a pickup truck. Maybe you have a van or a trailer or access. You know somebody who knows somebody that you can load this thing up and move it there. Honestly, secret pro tip here, hire a moving company. To move it from your shop across town doesn't cost that much, especially if you kind of give them a window of when they can do it. They don't have anything scheduled for Thursday morning. We'd be happy to do that. It's going to cost you less than a few $100, and your back is happy, and your customer is probably happy because they see that professionals are moving this in instead of, one grizzled old, craftsman with a donkey. I mean, that's not a good look. So in your brainstorming design process here, how many parts are you going to break this down into? If it's a china cabinet, certainly do not build this one piece. You will never be able to move it. So typically you do an upper and a lower unit, and then they are fastened together in some manner. Maybe you want to do this in 3 units, the lower, the middle, and the upper. 4 units. Make the lower 2 pieces that come together, maybe a molding that covers the joint, and then a middle and an upper. So those are going to be easier to move. Those are things you might be able to just pick up and carry in and not have to worry about any of the other, professional movers or renting a truck or so on and so forth. Okay, once you get to step 4, we're really cooking with gas here. You're into the sketch phase. So you're sitting down with some paper and you're coming up with a sketch that you can show the customer what you have in mind. I like to use graph paper. I have a notebook, just a 8.5 by 11 notebook, spiral bound, has graph paper in it. I can grab a straight edge. I can grab a ruler. I like an architect's ruler. I still have mine from high school drafting class. Thank you, Mr. Ferguson. And you can start getting fairly accurate scale drawings on this. And I will usually start out with a front view and then a side view, just so that I can see how this is coming together. Most people don't interpret 2-dimension drawings into a 3-dimension object. And that's why a lot of designers and artists will use like an isometric drawing. That's where the object is shown at like a quarter view so that you can see the side and the front and the top or the bottom at the same time. This takes a little bit of practice, a little bit of skill, but if you can do this, make an isometric drawing for your customer where they can see what this is going to look like in relative 3D. I like to use colored pencils and I'll go in and I will use the same color scheme of what it will look like, roughly. I mean, you don't have to get exact, but I highlight edges, I highlight molding, drawers, glass, so that you can show them this drawing. And I am by no means a great artist, but I can do well enough that somebody looks at it and they go, oh, yes, that's exactly what I had in mind. Boom. If you don't have any drawing skill, I think I've mentioned a couple times on this podcast, maybe you should take some art classes, some drawing classes, never too late, or turn to technology. Computer-aided design, CAD. I know you've heard about this before, and give it a hard consideration. There's SketchUp. It's a paid service, but they do have a free trial. A lot of woodworkers and craftsmen use SketchUp. There's an annual fee involved, which I'm not wild about, but it's not outrageous. There's AutoCAD, which is kind of the 800-pound gorilla of computer-aided design, and there's a whole bunch of other ones. Adobe Illustrator, though technically not a CAD program, it is a drawing program. And since that's what we're doing is we're drawing, you can use Illustrator for this. If you're cheapskate like I am, there's open source software. FreeCAD is one that I'm trying to teach myself to use right now. There's also Inkscape, which is the open source software of Adobe Illustrator. You can go from, I don't know, what is $1,000 a year or something to like zero. So if you're not familiar with those, check those out. Just, FreeCAD and Inkscape. There's thousands of videos on YouTube on how to use them, how to get started. There is a learning curve here. There is most definitely a learning curve. If you're under 25, it will probably take you 15 minutes. If you're over 55, it'll probably take you 15 years. Or maybe 15 months. Anyway, check that out. If all else fails, hire it out. There's a lot of people who are great artists who work for not a whole bunch of money, starving artists. And maybe you can get connected with one through your community and have them do all of your drawings. It could be money very, very well spent. Step 5, conference with the client. You want to make sure you're on the right track. You want to make sure you didn't design a Bombay curved front chest of drawers with a cabinet on top of it when they were really looking for a shaker style, no glass, just doors type, style. If you've gone through all this process and if you've listened to your client, you're probably going to be at least in the ballpark, if not spot on. There might be a couple little changes here or there. Do not take offense to this. If you're such a poet that any criticism of your work, sets you in a tizzy, get over it. You want the client involved. They want to be building this. When they have a dinner party, they're not going to say, oh yes, I had this made, versus, oh yes, I picked this up at IKEA. No, they want this made. They want to be a part of this. So let them. Kind of, keep your inner curmudgeon at bay, so to speak. So if that goes well, maybe they want this drawer a little wider, this one a little smaller, incorporate those in, and you're into step 6. Step 6, rough drawings and material list. So based off of your sketch, and hopefully you have 3, front, side, and isometric, you can start putting this thing together. You don't need to produce shop drawings at this point. Don't draw everything out to the nearest 64th of an inch, or I don't even know what that would be in millimeters, 0.1 maybe? You want to be able to figure out your materials. What is it going to take to build this? Because what you're going to have to do is to come up with an estimate, something to give to the customer and say, this is how much this is going to cost. And when you're doing the rough drawing, simple joinery, just basic joinery. Don't get really involved in this. Just, okay, this here, we'll use this for that, boom. So when you go into step 7 and start writing up your detailed estimate or bid, whichever term you use, now you need to know how much material you're going to need and what the cost of this material is. Hardware. Don't forget this. I read about somebody who forgot to include a hardware in a build and they ended up costing them like $100 or $150. I read about someone like that. Include your drawer slides. They can get incredibly expensive. You don't want to eat that. Your door hardware, the drawer pulls, things like that. Sometimes when you ask a customer about this, they will go deer in headlights. Like, what are you talking about? Oh my gosh, I can't do this. That's okay. Don't force the issue. But what I would suggest you do is to build in an allowance. If you think the hardware they might like is $10 a pull or a handle, build that into your estimate as an allowance. So these things don't creep up afterwards. Calculate your labor cost, your time. And this can get difficult. And there's other podcast episodes where I've talked about this. Again, that mind's eye, build the thing in your brain. What motions do you have to go through? What steps do you have to do? And you should be able to come up with a pretty good idea. One thing that I've used is I break that labor cost down into different categories. My design. How much time do I have just designing this project? How much time will you have in ordering materials? Are you going to have to call 6 different vendors and arrange delivery? Do you have to travel 120 miles to pick up some material? Milling. Once you have all your material, how much milling are you going to have to do? Are you going to have to take 4/4 stock down to 13/16 or to 3/4? Or can you have the lumber supplier do that for you? Caveat, usually they have really big planers that take off a lot of material very, very quickly, roughly. And so usually when I order material, I order it milled to 13/16, and then I run it through my little lunchbox planer that does a marvelous job and take it down to 3/4, or what would that be? 12 centimeters? No. 18 millimeters. Anyway, your assembly. How much time is it going to take in assembly? Your finishing. Are we doing this by hand? Are we staining by hand, which is right up there with root canal? Are we finishing everything by hand, which just suck it up and say this is going to take a bit? Or are we spraying, which is fantastic. Previous podcast on that. Delivery. Do you need to hire movers? Can you do this yourself? The install. How difficult is this going to be? Are you going to have to hire movers? Can you do this yourself? Is this across town? Is it in 3 counties over? How much time is that going to take? The install. Are you going to have to cut baseboard, trim drywall? What's involved here? Add that in. And of course, bookkeeping. Don't forget the bookkeeping, because you need to be keeping track of all this and you need to be compensated for this. So once you come up with all that, you've had your material costs, you've added your labor, you've added your profit margin, you've added the miscellaneous, which I encourage you to do because I guarantee you have forgot something. Make that a few percent of the overall. And you come up with a price. Yay. Now go check the market to see where you're at. If it's kind of a pedestrian piece, you can look at what the big furniture stores are doing, not IKEA, and come up with a plan. Your numbers may be so far off that you could build this for $89. Excuse me, that's more like $890, at the big furniture store. And so that could kind of, use that as a gauge. Maybe you're using quarter sawn white oak or tiger flame maple and with walnut burrows, and this could be $8,900. So spend some time on your price. I know it's probably the most agonizing part of this hang your shingle out and be a custom woodworker. And if that really, really, really bothers you, take your talents and go work for somebody. Let them take care of all of that. They give you a set of drawings and say, build it. And you go, right, boss. And you go off and have a happy life. So you have your estimate or your bid prepared. You need to deliver it. Sometimes that's by email. Sometimes that's in person. Be professional about it and just kind of gauged off of the customer. If it's a touchy-feely customer, you might want to just hand deliver that, drop it off. I was in the neighborhood. Take a look at it. If you have any questions, let me know. I'll contact you next week. Always determine a future contact point. Don't just send the bid, hand them the bid, and disappear. You work too hard. You need to follow up. Not that you're putting pressure, but you're just, do you have any questions about that? So on and so forth. Don't be accusatory. Well, it's been over a week. I haven't heard anything from you. No. Don't do that. Be helpful, okay? Keep that inner curmudgeon, under wraps. And of course, the terms of the bid, of the estimate. Do you want a down payment? Should it be 10%? Should it be 50%? Do you want payment in full, which would be a little unusual for a project like this? Do you want a pay schedule where, so much down upon purchase of materials, so much down, when it's assembled? There's all kinds of different ways you can do that. Red flag warning sign is when you use the words, well, I need a down payment so I can buy the materials. Ooh. You just told your client that you're not really financially viable and you need their money before you can even get started on this. We could probably do an entire episode just on down payment and bids and estimates. I think that's not a good practice. There's also a thing called retention, where you want 90% of the payment upon delivery, and when they are completely 100% satisfied, they mail you the remaining 10%. And of course, this is depending upon how much money we're talking about. If we're talking about $900, it's probably not a big deal. I wouldn't do retention there. It's kind of silly. But if it's $9,000, yeah, you might want to do that, because that gives the customer control. If a drawer is sticking, if it's not right, they still have a little leverage over you, and that makes them feel good. And so after step 7, this is the go, no go period. Either they say yes, which is fantastic. Maybe they say no, this is way over our budget, which means you didn't do a good job qualifying them in step 1. Maybe they want to tweak something here or there. Maybe they would like a little lower price to fit their budget. You can work with them at this point. If they just totally ghost you, they're gone. You really screwed up on the qualification, and you've lost a lot of money. You've lost a lot of time. And some people charge for this process, where they give the person a set of drawings, a plan that's been well designed, maybe a material list, and this is yours. If, it cost, 10% of the overall project, 20%. And if you accept the project, then we will refund that to you. There's all kinds of different schemes that can be used. You need to figure out what is good for your customer and what is good for you. Now we get into ordering materials in step 8. This includes tooling. If you need a special router bit, shaper bit to do a fancy molding, now's the time to order it, not 30 minutes before you actually need it. Supply chain has been kind of, well, weird. So you might have a long lead time on plywood. I can wait months, for plywood still. So really, really consider this. Detailed drawings. Now we go in and we build the shop drawings. You don't like doing shop drawings? Oh, you must like fixing your mistakes then. Because I guarantee there's an inverse relationship between the amount of time you spend on shop drawings and the amount of time you will spend correcting your screw up when you don't do shop drawings. So enough said. You get your materials, you start building. That's step 10. Step 11, the project's done. It needs to be delivered and it needs to be installed. It's not finished yet. When you do that delivery and that install, this is your marketing opportunity. There's drawers in there. Have a little stack of business cards so that at the dinner party, when everyone's admiring the new china cabinet that matches the dining room tables and chairs that was your grandmother's, no, that's actually a new piece. I had commissioned by, what was his name? I have a business card. She walks over, opens up the drawer, and passes out a business card. And then 3 other people say, could I have one of those? Because you didn't leave just one, you left a dozen. So this can be really, really good for future business. And by all means, put your name on it. This is not a bar stool. Put your name on this someplace, typically the back, so that somebody in 200 years could see who did such a marvelous job building this piece. And also put the date on it, because they thought it was 400 years old. It turns out that it's only 200 years old. And step 12, this is the nicest part of the project. This is where you receive payment in full and you do all of your bookkeeping. Part of that bookkeeping will probably be some retained earnings into the quarterly tax category. I know, I just ruined the entire podcast. But take care of this now. It's easier to take this money out and set it aside than it is a day before the quarterly tax payments due. And send a thank you note to the customer. This doesn't have to be super fancy. Oh, shoot, you could send them a text message in today's world, or maybe consider some custom note cards. You can order these online. They're super cheap. But it shows a bit of class. It shows that you really value that customer and that customer is going to remember you and pass your name on to all their friends and family who may want a custom piece like this. Okay, so this is kind of an overview of the design build process. I kind of emphasize steps 2 and 3 because if you screw this up, your life is going to get really, really difficult. I can't overemphasize step 1, qualifying the customer. That is super, super important to do well. But that's kind of it. If you kind of want to dive into this design process a little more, the 12-step program, let me know. Maybe we can expand this a little bit. But I think the step 2 and 3 are the ones that a lot of people really, really struggle with. Update, ASTM 2057 TAC 23 has passed. Yay! Or boo, depending on your frame of reference. This is the one that we talked about in the last podcast. All 4 of you who listened to that, I know most of you were asleep, like 3 minutes into it, but that is a piece of legislation that has now passed by the Consumer Product Safety Commission, and it will go on public record for a comment period for 30 days or something like that, and then it gets posted to the National Register, which is open for 120 days, and then it becomes law, a rule. Maybe it's a regulation. I don't know. And they're looking sometime in October. This is really going to take effect. This might affect you. This may not. If you're building charcuterie boards and cutting boards and laser engraved coasters, yeah, you could really care less. I have a link in the show notes to a really good article on Woodworking Network, I believe, that goes through and actually explains more of the details that is in the legislation and how you can calculate in your shop if your pieces are meeting criteria. Another big update is YouTube. Yay! Working at Woodworking is now on YouTube. I've uploaded like the first 20 episodes. I know it's incredibly slow. I will start adding the later episodes that I've been taking video of and getting that up. It might be more convenient for you to listen on YouTube than it is on your favorite podcast player. This would also be a really good time if you are so motivated to buy me a cup of coffee, because guess what I figured out? Video is expensive. OMG! You know, I've made a few videos for this and for that, and it was no big deal, 4 gigs for that and 10 gigs for that. This stuff starts adding up, and my poor little Linux machine is full, and I filled up an old external hard drive. There's 100 gig. It's full. I just ordered a 4 terabyte external hard drive. Yeah, I know you people out there who do YouTube are laughing at me for such a small, hard drive. Hey, it's what I could afford, okay? So anyway, if you feel so moved, buy me a cup of coffee. I would really appreciate that. Recommendations? Since we're talking about design, I want to turn you on to Brent Hall of Hall Millwork. You can find him on the Build Show Network and on his own website. There's a link in the show notes. This is a guy down in Texas. He does really, really, really high-end old architectural millwork and build, and he is just the absolute master of design. He will help you avoid those embarrassing situations where you may mix up your Doric and your Corinthian. Another person that I really encourage you to follow is George Walker. I believe I've mentioned George before. He has a blog, links in the show notes, and I've also included a YouTube on his channel. He knows everything there is to know about proportions and how to design something, well, literally without a tape measure, using a story stick. If this is supposed to be this high, then we're going to start breaking this down into these proportions. And it's just absolutely fascinating to see what he can do. This is going to give your pieces that little bit of wow. You enter your piece into the county fair, and people are going to go by and look at yours and just like, oh yeah, that's obviously first place, because it just looks different than the other entries, but they're not really sure why. It just looks better. Well, it looks better because you followed some of the rules, the laws of proportion that is so ingrained into the human psyche. Missed jobs. Phone call from a lady wanting me to fix her rocking chair. No big surprise there. But I encourage you to listen to how a person asked a question, because she said, I would like an estimate on how much it would cost to fix my rocking chair. She did not ask if I could fix her rocking chair. And you can kind of see the different connotations there. Use your imagination. Maybe there was a bar fight and the rocking chair got damaged and they need to make an insurance claim. Or there's a contested will and somebody wants grandma's old rocking chair, but it needs to be worked, so they want to back. I mean, there's just all kinds of weird scenarios there. But just figure out what they're asking you for. Are they asking for an estimate, or are they asking you to fix it? If they want you to fix it, how much will it cost? That's different than, I would like an estimate on you fixing the rocking chair. Okay, you see the differences there? So anyway, really appreciate listening to Working at Woodworking Podcast. Special thanks to listeners in Indianapolis, Indiana. Greatly appreciate that. And also St. Albert, Alberta, Canada. And the one listener in the United Arab Emirates. Really appreciate that. There's affiliate links down there in the show notes. You can buy me a cup of coffee. You can order something from Taylor Tools, or you can check out the VoIP phone service for your business phone. Until next episode, happy woodworking.